T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
We rejoin our heroes following their victory at the Fortress of Ludditishness. However, having vanquished their foes via a proper and overwhelming dispensation of technological justice, a pox fell upon Ethan. A pox so vile that he was rendered unable to speak. Horror of horrors! Would this be the end for our dynamic duo? Is this the end of the citizens of tech as we know it? Stay tuned until... Wait, this is the freaking intro. Yeah, that was all just needless drama. We're back. So, Ethan, having mostly recovered from your plague, what do we have in store today?
Well, me and my phlegm are here to bring you a new website, another Raspberry Pi competitor, Vanishing electronic sensors, a power-sucking Facebook app, Edgar Allan Poe, pluripotent stem cells, nanobot medicine delivery, and all of that along with our regular features, content I like, and today I learned, and buddy, you aren't kidding about the pox falling upon me. I spent the last week in bed, coughing, blowing vile liquids out of my face. It's been awful. Sleeping a lot, though, man. I'll tell you. A week of this thing kicking my rear end. And while I was doing that, you went off and built us a new website.
I did, yes. It's probably old news to most of you out there, but citizensoftech.com has been completely overhauled. We built it on new, faster hardware and faster software, actually. We are using the most recent version of PHP, which, Ethan, as I was... I think there were some OMG, this is so fast sort of instant messages that I was sending you. It's like 3 times faster than PHP 5. We're using PHP 7, so that's sort of a nerdy little bit there. The goal with this was to make a content-focused design instead of just being, okay, here are some show notes and, it's all part of one RSS feed. We can have more community interaction because, frankly, the old site just wasn't cutting it in that regard. We have separate RSS feeds. If you just want to receive blog content, you can do that. We'll put a link on the site if you want to do so. New site.
Yeah, the old site was hosted by Podbean, which still is hosting the audio files for the podcast for us. Podbean's been great in that regard.
Yep.
But if you use that, the web service that you get, it's pretty locked down. There's not a lot you can do with it. So if you want to be creative, you kind of can't. You're tied into what themes they give you. And it was okay, but now we've got the freedom to do all kinds of stuff.
Pretty much whatever we want. So, yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
So excited about that. Onward to actual Citizens of Tech content. We have yet another cheap system on a board.
This one is from Chip. So if you go to www.getchip.com, you can look at this thing. $9 buys you a lot of computer is where they're pricing this thing. There's some kits and stuff. We'll get into that in a minute. But, it's really basic. You're only getting composite video out of the box. You can do some add-ons. HDMI, VGA, you can get battery in a case, etc. And then it's Linux. It's Chip OS. Presumably Debian is the base, although we couldn't find 100% confirmation of what exactly is underlying Chip OS. Open source hardware and software, etc. And then one flavor of this thing you could get is the Pocket Chip, and this is more like if you're buying a Raspberry Pi, the kind of a thing what you think about here. $49 you get. The chip, of course, a 3,000 milliampere battery, 4.3-inch screen, 470 by 272 with resistive touch, a super clicky, quirky keyboard, a rugged injection molded shell. How rugged is rugged? I don't know for $49, but whatever, that's what they say. And again, fully open source, GPIO breakouts, the chip is removable, etc. Do you want one? I don't know. I mean, Eric, did you when you pulled most of the content together for this show? I mean, what was your thought of what you might do with this thing?
Not much. I mean, it's a cool idea. I guess I don't have it yet again. I don't have a practical use for it, but the people who probably will are going to be, Internet of Things fans.
So the screen is interesting to me, and here's the thought that I've had about that home automation stuff.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's compelling to me about home automation is the idea of if I put some kind of a touch screen in the wall, can I do various things either in a region of the home or do whole home control, etc. And as I've looked into it, if it involves an iPad and then apps and then a bunch of stuff that can work with that, it might be relatively easy to assemble, but the costs are astronomical.
Hundreds and hundreds of dollars, yeah, at best.
$49 gets you something with a little screen. Maybe there's a use case there. I bet it would be a ton more legwork, but I know I've done enough homework on the home automation stuff to know there's lots that cater to the home hobbyist and to makers and so on. Maybe there's a use case there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest use case. I mean, yeah, it can be used for other things, but that's probably the number one use case beyond, teaching a kid how to assemble and work in Linux or whatever, I guess. That was basically my take on it. It's an Internet of Things utility piece, really, and that's why it's not of huge import to me personally. But
and the IoT tie-in is, again, going back to the home automation is where it maybe is interesting to me. Anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, kind of related to IoT, we'll jump from that and talk about vanishing electronic sensors. So the story comes to us from Ars Technica. The idea here is a brain dissolvable electronics monitor. You consume this thing, and then it disappears inside your body over a period of time. So
sounds great.
Yeah. Well, it's better than the alternative of it staying around. We need you to swallow this, and then anyway. Yeah. So Washington University School of Medicine, the intent is short-term use. It literally vanishes inside your body after a short period of time, this electronic sensor. And what can I do with it? Well, you could use it to monitor pressure inside your body, temperature, pH, motion, flow, other things like that. And so far they've used it in the brains of rats. And, again, brain being the prime thing here. You could use it for other areas of the body. I mean, I could imagine it being, injected under the skin. You could swallow the thing, and so on, and monitor other stuff. But I guess brain is the big thing. The brain being a really tough area to monitor. What with its inconvenient placement inside your skull that makes it really hard to get at.
It really should be more accessible.
Well, in all seriousness, all of the close proximity to what all is around it makes monitoring the brain a really tough thing.
Oh, yeah.
You're dealing with a bone saw and cutting a chunk out of your head for certain really delicate operations, as I understand, where they're trying to monitor or relieve pressure, etc. There's just not a lot of room to work. So this is, they've got something that works in the brains of a rat. Brain of a rat. How much room is there? I don't know. That's kind of an interesting thought, because not every brain takes up the full brain case, as I've seen some x-rays of different critters and stuff. But presumably this would work in a human. To quote the article here, to develop the wireless dissolving model, Murphy, one of the scientists involved, and his colleagues teamed up with John Rogers Group at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which specializes in wearable and implantable electronics. The Wii gadgets they came up with generally contain biodegradable, silicon-based, piezoresistive sensors, which can change their electrical resistance with a slight bending, surrounded by more silicon, magnesium, and a dissolvable copolymer polylactic-glycolic acid, a PLGA, which is already used in medical devices. Effectively, they're made from stuff that we're already eating and drinking. So it's kind of a known quantity in that sense. And the current models are lasting for a few days in the brain of these rats, and the goal is to also make some that can last for weeks.
Moving on, the Facebook app for Android is a power parasite. And this comes to us via The Guardian. The Android Facebook app can reduce battery life by up to 20%. And it also impacts performance. And now this is interesting to me because I have handed a couple of phones over to my wife when I've made phone handset changes. For example, the latest one was my Galaxy S6, which is no slouch. It performed admirably for me, no performance problems. And then I handed it over to my wife, and a few days later she was saying, this thing's really running slow and whatever, and we couldn't figure out why. But I don't use Facebook on my mobile devices, and she does. So we were wondering, why the same phone would run so drastically different for her than it did for me.
Because
and
Facebook
sure enough,
sucks. Literally, it sucks electrons and CPU power right out of the device.
CPU cycles, it's just sucking it up. Yep. So yeah, disabling that has helped her battery life and performance. And no huge surprise here. Back in October of 2015, there were similar issues with the iOS version of the Facebook app. And ditto back in 2014 as well. So Facebook.
So don't forget to head up to the Citizens of Tech Facebook page and like us. We'd really appreciate that. Facebook.com/Citizens of Tech. Yes, we really have a page there.
Yep, we do.
I feel dirty.
So yeah, even though I hate it, go give us a like.
Oh gosh. Okay. This is an interesting segue into this book I'm reading. I started reading it last night. It's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And the idea behind deep work is that our always connected life, like using Facebook or whatever, is making it really hard for us to concentrate, to focus on some task. And Cal Newport in the book makes the case that you have to be able to focus for a long period of time to produce something that's new, that's creative, that's original. You have to be able to ponder and focus and think deeply. And in the intro of the book that I read last night, he talks about an experience of being in some postgraduate work, working on a PhD, being in some high-end classes, working with some really intense professor-level people who he had this one scenario he painted of walking into a room where the professor and the people who were studying under them, the whole session was them staring at a board filled with equations and so on and just kind of thinking. Not a lot of talking, a whole lot of thinking. And they weren't distracted, nothing changed, there wasn't very much discussion, it was just a lot of focus on what was written on that board and pondering and contemplating. He also talked about other people who have built their fortresses of solitude so that they can spend time focusing on things and getting away from it all, but that Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and 5 million other things that bing at us and send notifications and so on really take our ability to focus away and make it very hard for us to do deep work. Instead, we're doing shallow work, answering emails and doing routine stupid crap that isn't really hard to do and anybody could do it, honestly. And so we're kind of cheating ourselves of our ability to create unique and, again, that new creative kind of stuff that requires the deep thought. So here's a plug for the book. I mean, I've finished the intro section. I'm halfway through chapter 1, but it's quite compelling and it looks deeply researched by Cal Newport. So if you're frustrated, as I am, by your inability to get the quality of work done that you want to, I'm hoping this book is going to, A, challenge me to stop checking things all the time, and then B, a solution so that I can make that a permanent part of life. So that I'm not on Facebook, but I'm on all the other things. So I don't know. Is this even a big problem for you, Eric? You know what I mean with all this?
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was on Twitter.
I should have seen that coming.
No, I totally get what you're talking about, and I think it makes a lot of sense. The attention span and the ability to focus in depth on tasks has sort of deteriorated the more connected we become. I can see the logic behind that. So yeah, that's
now
pretty
you
interesting
were able
stuff.
to focus enough to do a little homework on Edgar Allan Poe, and you've got a feature for us about Mr. Poe.
Yeah, so this is our feature and our past segment for this week. Edgar Allan Poe, it's all relative. And the information for this largely came from a New York Times article, but also some from Wikipedia and a few other spots. So in 1848, Edgar Allan Poe, who was a lauded American poet, he wrote a 150-page piece of prose entitled Eureka. Eureka was a layman's description of the nature and origins of the universe. Now, cosmology wasn't a very hot seller at the time, and it flopped majorly. One reviewer actually called it errant fudge. To quote the article, 100 years later, T.S. Eliot summed up the critical consensus. Eureka, he wrote, makes no deep impression, because we are aware of Poe's lack of qualification in philosophy, theology, or natural science.
Oh, he didn't have the credentials, so no one took him seriously.
Yeah, exactly. He was a layman that was interested in astronomy. You know, he would use a telescope and observe the stars, and he enjoyed that, much like, you know, you or I or a bunch of people listening to this show probably. So, as T.S. Eliot said, he didn't have the credentials, so therefore it doesn't matter. So, what does this all have to do with relativity? Common wisdom of the 19th century was that the universe was static, eternal, and largely unchanging. Now, Poe described in Eureka that the entire universe began with an explosion from a, quote, single primordial particle in, quote, one instantaneous flash.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, 1848 he said this, right? He wrote this. And then also, quote, from that one particle as a center, let us suppose to be irradiated spherically in all directions to immeasurable but still definite distances in the previously vacant space, a certain inexpressibly great yet limited number of unimaginably yet not infinitely minute atoms. So this also sounds sort of familiar, right? Are there some inaccuracies in there? Sure. For one thing, current cosmological research indicates that not only all of the matter in the known universe originated in a Big Bang, but all of the space, quote unquote, as well. This is hard enough for us to comprehend, so we'll cut Edgar a little bit of slack, I think. Still, I thought it was remarkable that he, who was, you know, like I said before, just an amateur stargazer, could come up with this theory. And overall, it's a very accurate model of the Big Bang as we currently understand it. And it was almost 60 years before Einstein would posit the theories of relativity that would lay the foundation for the Big Bang theory and modern cosmology, and a full 112 years before it became generally accepted right around 1960.
Now, it would have been interesting to know if Edgar Allan Poe, looking through a telescope, saw or made some observation that made him think, oh, things are expanding, because, I mean, that to be able to detect that is pretty minute. So I kind of doubt that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what all got that chain of events in his mind and took him down that road. Pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's astonishing. I mean, the way that we can tell, well, maybe not me or you, but that, you know, astrophysicists can determine how far away something is and then determine if it's moving away is through radio spectrometry, right? The redshift of the wavelengths of the light that are reaching us. And he obviously didn't have the opportunity to have that. So for him to come up with this theory before pretty much anyone thought that, you know, an expanding universe was a real thing was really pretty cool. In 1848, he wrote a letter to a friend. He said, "What I have propounded will, in good time, revolutionize the world of physical and metaphysical science. I say this calmly, but I say it."
Of course, he was also a brutal drunk and rather suicidal, so...
Yeah, I mean, there is that. It may have come to him in an opium dream or something. But it's actually interesting. There's a guy who posted an article called Edgar Allan Poe Had a Time Machine and I Can Prove It on historybuff.com. I'll put that link in as well. He lists all the reasons that he thinks that Edgar Allan Poe was a time traveler because he either predicted things or stated things that would later be proven true when people thought it was outlandish. And, you know, maybe it all was just an alcoholic. I don't know.
Well, there's got to be some logic explained in the book, so I wonder, and you know, if we can go back to 1848 and take a look at this thing, if it's published or, you know, available. I'd be curious to know how he explains himself, and if he got to, maybe he got to the right answer by a very wrong way.
And
but in any case,
that's my guess. Yeah, so,
I had no idea Poe was into science at all.
Yeah.
I just kind of imagined him moping around the local coffee shop, feeling sad
brooding,
and telling
darkly.
sad stories, brooding in between fits of drunkenness and falling over and contemplating different ways to kill himself, and then writing about them in The Pit and the Pendulum, etc. Yeah. Anyway, I loved reading Poe growing up. I did like to read some creepy stuff. And Poe, I read quite a bit of Poe, a number of stories. The one that impacted me the most was The Cask of Amontillado, where he walls up a friend so-called. He literally chains him up to a wall, and then like in an alcove, and then puts layer upon layer of brick and bricks the guy in and leaves him there to die.
Ugh.
That's it. Oh, it's
brutal.
It's a dark
I remember
story,
that
man.
one. Yeah.
It is a dark story.
So whether Poe was a time traveler, a cosmology savant, or just a finder of needles and haystacks, you can feel free to weigh in the comments section for this episode on citizensofTech.com.
Love to hear your opinions.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Looking to the future, homegrown ears ratback style. So this comes from futurism.com. University of Tokyo and Kyoto researchers have grown a human ear via stem cells, and where did they grow it? Not on the side of someone's head that needed it, rather on a rat's back.
Poor rat.
And there's a little more to this than just sprinkling ear seeds on a rat's back, okay? And which you kind of would have gathered from the stem cell thing. So let's quote the article. The team induced pluripotent stem cells. Pluripotent, they can become anything you guide them to become. They have the potential to be whatever. They aren't, certain stem cells are locked into a particular role ultimately that they'll play. Pluripotent, you can do whatever if you guide them appropriately. So this team induced pluripotent stem cells to grow into ear cartilage, which was then placed into a kind of biological tubing that mimicked the shape of an adult ear. End quote. So, continue the quote. The form was implanted under the skin of a live rat, where it was left to grow for about 2 months, and during that time, the tubes that shaped the ear dissolved and left behind an adult human ear. Okay? And that's cool. And so now you're wondering, so is it a rat ear? I mean, but in the shape of a human ear? I mean, what is it actually? And what the article says is that the team notes that the work will allow us to further explore the possibility of creating body parts apart from the ear, such as windpipes. In addition, Japanese scientists are saying that because the ear was created as a living part in children, it will develop as the child grows. In other words, we needed a carrier, so the rat was the carrier, the site if you're going to build this thing. But it is human cells, human stem cells that grew into a human ear, compatible with human biology. That's what this thing really is, and it's the future, and only rats can take advantage of these human ears so far. Like the brain thing. What is it with the rats?
I know,
the future is rats, man. Anyway,
and we're not done with them in this episode.
Oh gosh, are there more rats coming up?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, if the whole you can grow new tissue, I mean, imagine what this does for a burn victim.
Oh yeah.
Let's say. Wow, to be able to grow a functional bit of flesh like this, because appearance is so integral to the human experience. That's it's pretty extraordinary, pretty great.
In continuing with the rodent testing, I guess, on to nanobot medicine delivery. And this comes to us via futurism.com. And a team at the University of California have claimed that they have managed to deliver a medical payload directly into the gut tissue of a living organism using micromotored nanobots. So these micromotor-powered bots are powered by gas bubbles that form in a chemical reaction with the stomach acids of this living organism, which in this case is mice. The micro machines themselves are 20 micrometers by 5 micrometers.
Oh, a millionth of a meter. Wow. Okay, that's really small.
Itty bitty bitty bitty. And they're coated in zinc, which then reacts with the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. And that is what powers the movement. So the gas bubbles form up, and it propels it forward, like we said before, in currently the stomach of a living mouse, and they embed themselves into the stomach tissue after traveling at 60 micrometers per second. So it takes a little while to get from the center of the stomach to the edge, but then they embed themselves in, and they can deliver their payload for up to 12 hours. And then
okay, into the gut tissue. So that's the whole thing here. You can't really steer these things. There's no wireless comm back to bot headquarters that says, "Congratulations, now you've got your gas bubble. You are powerful. Now go to." You can't do that. It's just gonna, as these things find their way down the digestive tract, they're gonna hit the wall at some point, and then deliver their payload.
Yep.
Via that wall.
Exactly. Yeah, it just goes in whatever direction it's pointed and crashes into the stomach lining, and then delivers its payload. So it's a dumb bomb filled with medicine.
Crude, but awesome.
Yeah, but effective. It's like a caveman technology application of futuristic technology. It's kind of cool. But yeah, they're not remote controlled. There's no perceptible side effects at this point have been detected. So we can look forward to this happening, in the very near future. Wait, no. FDA trials are going to be long and rigorous because before this can be done in a human, holy cow, can you imagine? It's going to be audited many, many times over from many different angles to make sure that it's not going to hurt anyone. But still, really cool advancement. So yet another awesome medical advancement that I want to keep my eye on.
Well, content I like. We have a few things today. One is another podcast that I listen to and a side project spawned by that podcast. So the podcast is called Here Be Monsters. It's put out, if I remember right, by KCRW. Anyway, if you go to hbmpodcast.com, abbreviation Here Be Monsters, and then dreamtapes.org is the spin-off project. Let me explain to you what Here Be Monsters is all about. I'll describe it as that Here Be Monsters covers the dark, otherworldly aspects of being human. And I don't mean supernatural exactly. It's pretty clear that the people that are in charge of the podcast don't believe in anything, ghostly or anything like that. It's kind of more the primal, the ugly side of what it can mean to be a person, or just stuff that's right out there weird and strange. And sometimes they talk about uncomfortable things, but they're not uncomfortable like they're trying to titillate you or make you use sensationalism to to hold your interest. Well, kind of like if you watch TV on HBO and it's TVMA, you're going to see something titillating and out there that could be kind of offensive or rude, and they're just using it to hold your interest, right?
Yep.
This is not that. That is not what Here Be Monsters is like. And so here's an example of an episode. They talked on HBM about. They recorded a bunch of audio that had been submitted to a website where you could submit prayers to Satan. And so these people would call in and they would say, I need Satan to do X, Y, and Z for me, and then they'd close each prayer request, if you will, with Hail Satan. And you're sitting here listening to this going, this is dark, man. This is just dark. And that was the whole thing. It was fairly unedited, except there was just one call after another call after another call. To this website, and then kind of an interview at the end of that with the website, I guess, that did that is closed down now, but they talked about it and why, and and various things. So it really takes you to some dark corners of humanity that I've just found fascinating. So they've spun off the Dream Tapes Project. The Dream Tapes Project is people waking up from their dreams and then speaking into an audio recorder they've got handy, immediately while you've still got the dream in your head. And they talk about what the dream was, and and so on, and then the dreams are later compiled into a podcast. And so they've crowdsourced the transcription of the dreams. Not every dream is that interesting and going to make a cut for a Dream Tapes episode, which they've kind of spun off this little series of audio from Dream Tapes. This caught my interest because they did the first Dream Tapes episode on Here Be Monsters. And I loved it. I was absolutely hooked. So I actually signed up to transcribe some dreams, and I'm hooked into the Google Drive share. And I haven't actually done one yet, but I got to grab an MP3 and sit. I can type pretty fast, so I was going to sit and transcribe one. So sorry, content I like. Here Be Monsters podcast, and then Dream Tapes Project, dreamtapes.org. Really, really cool stuff if you're into unusual things about humanity. Just a great show.
So are you going to have your iPhone at the ready when you wake up to record stuff about your dreams, or?
I'm just going to transcribe other people's dreams because they're hand selecting people who have got the audio. They've sent them the audio equipment and so on.
Okay.
And my job is when those people have recorded stuff to do the transcription, and then the guy that makes the show uses the transcriptions to figure out what's interesting enough to make a show out of it.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, that's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah.
Moving on to my content I like. The Last Question by Isaac Asimov. I'm sure, Ethan, you must have read this, right?
I have not read much Asimov, I say to my shame, because every nerd's read a bunch, but I have read very little, actually. And the last paperback I read by Asimov was, I don't remember the title of it. It wasn't one of his more popular titles, though. It went back to the 80s. But, I've never made it through, was it the Robot Chronicles? That I should have, from what everyone tells me. Give me your nerd card.
Turn in your nerd card, yeah.
So anyway, the last question.
The last question is it's a short story. It probably take you 5-10 minutes to read, depending on how fast you read. It's sort of an existential quandary written in story form, having to deal with origins and things of that nature. So, having read that several times in my life, I stumbled upon basically this person illustrated it in a graphic novel comic style method and posted it on Imgur. And let me just get out of the way at the outset. The last question stands alone. So if you find a text version of it, they're all over the place. Like I said, it's a short story. Definitely read it. I may even recommend read it that way first. But if you have read the last question, we'll link to this Imgur gallery where this graphic novel rendition of it is. It's very interesting to see it as it's imagined by someone who obviously cares a great deal for the content of this Asimov story. I won't spoil anything, but definitely either check out the last question itself or check out this graphic novel version of it if you are familiar. It was just well worth the time, and I enjoyed it very, very much. So yeah, definitely check that out. And Ethan, did you learn anything today?
I did. I learned how long it would take to fill a pool with saliva. I think I've mentioned on the show before, what if what-if.xkcd.com. The guy that does the XKDC comics is a bit of a scientist and studies up weird questions that people send him. So somebody sent him how long it would take to fill a pool with saliva. So to quote him, at 500 milliliters per day, which he pulled that reference off of some scientific study that said a 5-year-old, and who could produce more saliva possibly than a 5-year-old.
Fair enough.
Assuming 500 milliliters per day, it would take you 8,345 years to fill an Olympic-sized pool. And that is a long time for us to wait. So let's imagine you went back in time and you get started on the project early. The rest of the post, he goes back 8,000 odd years in time and picks some weird events that were interesting to him and talks about how full the pool would be at that point and draws it in his classic XKDC stick figure style of you standing in a disgusting pool of saliva.
I love it.
So did I actually learn anything? I don't know. I was just fascinated because I love What If. It's always a good time. What about you? Did you learn anything?
Yeah, actually, I learned that Richard Feynman got bored during the Manhattan Project and learned to pick locks so that he could play pranks on his colleagues. Found this on Wikipedia. In Feynman's own words, quote, "There wasn't anything to do there. So, being bored, he indulged his curiosity by learning to pick the combination locks on cabinets and desks used to secure papers. Feynman played many jokes on colleagues. In one case, he found the combination to a locked filing cabinet by trying the numbers he thought a physicist would use. It proved to be 27, 18, 28 after the base of natural logarithms, E, or Euler's number, which is 2.71828, and found that the 3 filing cabinets were where a colleague kept a set of atomic bomb research notes, all had the same combination.
No! He used the same password.
Yeah, he left a series of notes in the cabinets as a prank, which initially spooked his colleague into thinking a spy or saboteur had gained access to atomic bomb secrets. Oops. And on that bombshell, we draw this episode of Citizens of Tech to a close, which works well because we always prefer to go out with a bang. Don't forget to share the show with your nerdy friends. A 5-star rating on iTunes does wonderful things for us, so don't be shy. We have a slew of ways for you to share the love via Twitter, Facebook, email, smoke signals, and unladen swallows.
Would those be African or European swallows, my friend?
No idea. Till next time, stay nerdy, my friends.